Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a wonderful day. It's so nice to be able to spend this time with you. There are so many moments on the Jewish calendar that are relatively unknown. I mean, obviously, if Hanukkah was coming, you'd try to figure out when is Hanukkah. This year, actually, it falls out directly with those other holidays. At Passover, people look, when's Passover? When's Rosh Hashanah? When's Yom Kippur? But there's a time in our calendar right now which, and I've said this before over the past 9 months, but I'm going to say it again. Every single year, when certain times in the calendar pass, they pass. And you think about them and you try to focus on them. But this year, since October 7th, certain times of the year, when they pass, they've hit differently. I can't explain it. That's all I can say is they hit differently. And right now, we're on the saddest time on the Jewish calendar. It's called the 9 days. It's between the first of Av and the ninth of Av, which will be called Tisha B'Av. And we're going to talk about that and we're going to go through some of the history over the next couple of days. But this time, historically, has been a very sad time for the Jewish people. I think the ninth of Av, which is going to be next Monday night and Tuesday, that day itself there are something like 30 or 40 major world events that have happened to the Jewish people, including that was the day in 1492 that the Jews were expelled from Spain. That was the day in 1290 the Jews were expelled from England. World War I started on that day. And both of the holy temples in Jerusalem were destroyed on that day. The Talmud says that the temples were destroyed because of sinat chinam, baseless hatred. People, especially people in the Jewish community, hating each other for no reason, just because. And so I want to focus on that a little bit today and try to really understand it and understand what you and I can do right now to change that. A couple of years ago, in Israel, there was an animated movie that was released, and it was called Agadat Churban, the legend of a destruction. It was actually created by the same directors as that famed Israeli film Ushpizin. It was probably the first major Israeli film that made it big in North America. And the movie was made up of 1,500 drawings by professional artists, and they depicted the events in Jerusalem prior to the destruction. And they accompanied it by really great voiceovers and like these really animated voice actors. And it tells the story of the Jewish revolt against the Roman Empire, which ultimately led to the destruction of the temple in the year 70 CE, or the destruction of the second temple. And the storyline is that the revolt degenerated into a civil war between the Jews themselves, which ultimately handed the Romans a victory. In the years leading to the destruction, there were numerous Jewish groups which didn't get along with each other. There were the priests, the Kohanim, who were members of Jerusalem's elite class, living in the wealthy neighborhoods of the city. Many of them had close connections with the Romans. The Romans at the time had ruled Jerusalem and the entire country for quite a while, and their influence was really everywhere. The Roman governor would even select the high priest, giving the job to the highest bidder or the most well connected individual. Usually, funny enough, the two went hand in hand. Shock, you decide. Instead of appointing the worthiest individual, the holiest, the person who spiritually would be able to be the high priest, it was a job that was just money and prestige. That's it during that time. And this group supported the Roman occupation and they cooperated with it. There were mainly uh, a group called the Sadducees. These Sadducees, who were they? They were Jews who had left traditional Jewish observance and they created new interpretations of the Torah. There was another group called the Zealots. The Zealots were a violent group that emerged from the difficult conditions of the Roman occupation. And they were very heavy-handed on the Jews and on Judaism. The leader of the Zealots was a man by the name of Abba Sikra, also known as Ben Bateach. He was the nephew of the famed Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the spiritual leader of the Jewish people at the time, and this leader of the Zealots, this Abba Sikra, was his nephew. Between them was another group called the Perushim, or the Pharisees. And these were the traditional Jews, the majority of rank and file, who continued to maintain Jewish life as they had received it at Mount Sinai. The revolt was provoked by the exceptional cruelty of Florus. He was the final Roman governor of Judea. And he tried to raid the treasures of the temple, and he brought foreign soldiers into the city who would pillage and murder. And so he provoked this terrible anger among the population. Jerusalem's zealots were divided into many subgroups, and instead of joining forces against the common enemy, which what you would think would make most sense, they fought each other for control of the city, and in turn, it turned into a full-fledged civil war, where Jews were killing each other, even within the Holy Temple. It was a terrible, terrible time for the Jewish people. When the Roman legions came to Judea to quell the rebellion, they approached from the north, first putting an end to the rebellion across the Galilee and laying waste to city after city, and Jerusalem was going to be their final destination. When they arrived in Jerusalem, they didn't rush to attack. The general, his name was Vespasian. Vespasian was the general at the time, and right afterwards he became the emperor of Rome. And he said that attacking the city immediately would cause all of the rifting Jewish factions to join forces. So what did he do? He waited until the Jews decreased their own numbers through all their infighting. There's a great quote from him. He said, "When your enemies are killing each other on their own, you should just sit back and watch." That's what he told his soldiers. The Jews were busy building fortifications and producing weaponry. They were weakening their own lines with this devastating civil war. He wasn't wrong. In Jerusalem at the time, it was really everyone against everyone. In the Zealots' quest, in Abba Sikra's quest to force the moderates to join the rebellion, they burned the storage houses of grain, which had enough to sustain Jerusalem for 21 years. What happens? A famine sets in. And when the Romans entered, they found a starved and a weary city. How easy was victory then? It just fell into their lap. The point of this film, back to the film, I think, was to demonstrate how divisions between Jews themselves were the cause of their downfall. And I remember seeing the film and feeling this sense of relief in the film. I mean, this was the point of it, when seeing the Holy Temple being destroyed. And then kind of checking that against my own knowledge of Jewish history and thinking to myself, wow, maybe that's what it felt like during that time. The infighting, the strife amongst Jews was so bad that it was relieving to know that there was nothing to fight over. and the fighting would subside. The destruction of the temple was a tremendous shock for the Jewish people. Jewish life at that time revolved around the temple. Most people, if you ask them, they would say Judaism would not survive without it. I mean, 52 years later, the Bar Kokhba revolt arose with the hope of rebuilding it. It also ended in destruction and devastation. And guess which day it ended? It ended on that same exact day, on Tisha B'Av. That's one day, Monday night and Tuesday. We just lay low. It's not a good day for the Jews. During that time, it's hard to feel it, but just to know it, that the temple was life for 410 years of the first temple, and then over 300 years of the second temple. It was life. And then it was gone. Every single day. I'll give you an example of how much it was life. Every single day since then, we have wished and dreamed of that temple being rebuilt, of being back in Jerusalem. For 2,000 years, it wasn't like a thought or it happened once in a while, or no, for 2,000 years, every single day, every celebration. You know why we break the glass under the chuppah? To remember that we're mourning the temple. Any celebration, you're going to see there's something sad since then. I think that there was a realization that began to sink in during that time, that the destruction of the temple wasn't a technical matter. It wasn't that the Romans were stronger than us. They realized that the problem was much deeper. The infighting and the civil war that had brought them down, instead of mounting revolt after revolt, they needed to focus inward on healing the rifts in the Jewish community. And that's why our sages taught in the Talmud, the temple was destroyed because of baseless hatred. If you go to Jerusalem today, there are groups of Jews who are busy preparing to rebuild the temple. They have ready-made architectural plans, which are ready to be submitted to the building commission. They prepare the various vessels. They're attempting to recreate the ketores, the incense that were offered on the altar. But it's beautiful, and it's beautiful to see they're training Kohanim. People go there to get trained. But the problem isn't just a technical one. The reason we don't have a temple is not because the Guwaq, the Jordanians, control the Temple Mount. Let's imagine we would succeed in convincing the Arab world to allow us to build the temple. And we would actually build it. What would happen then? It doesn't take a prophet to foresee the results. Before long, there would be conflict. There would be infighting. It would be the same story again and bring us to the point where we would lose the temple. Over the past 2,000 years, the Jewish community has understood that the path to rebuilding the temple passes through our personal journey of self-improvement. The Rebbe said this countless times. The way to fix the problem of senseless hatred is through senseless love. Love another, even one who doesn't deserve your love. They might not be nice to you, and they might even fight you. But make it your business. Make it your business to help them. When the Jewish people will be united, we will have the opportunity to build the eternal temple. It's not worth it. It's not worth it to choose philosophy over people. It's not worth it to choose opinion over an individual. This week, we begin reading the final book of the Torah, the book of Devarim. And in a few weeks, this book is going to speak about bringing sacrifices specifically in the temple. The verse is going to say, "For you have not come until now to rest and to inherit." And Rashi tries to understand to rest and inheritance, and explains that this rest refers to Shiloh, and this inheritance refers to Jerusalem. That's what the rest and the inheritance is. If you don't understand, let me explain. The explanation doesn't seem to fit the verse from the literal perspective, because both expressions seem to be speaking of the same place, the place which God will choose when the Jewish people settle and inherit the land. And there's an opinion in the Talmud that both expressions are actually referring to Jerusalem. So why does Rashi explain it differently? And maybe we can explain it like this. Shiloh was the place where the tabernacle was, where the temporary temple was. It was a place of rest. The people of Israel during that time, they lived peacefully with each other. They didn't fight between themselves, and definitely not in or around the tabernacle in Shiloh. The temple in Jerusalem, on the other hand, was Nachla. It was the final inheritance. It was the final place where the temple would reside. But it was not a place of rest. It was not a place of peace. Not during the first temple and not during the second temple. Last week, in the Haftorah, in the prophets that we read after the Torah reading, we opened with the verse of Isaiah. So says God, the heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footrest. What is the home you can build for me? Where is the place of my rest? And the Rebbe explained that there could be a house for God, but not a place of rest. There's infighting. And if there's infighting, God cannot find rest. The parent, in the metaphor, cannot find rest when the children are fighting. Where can we build a temple? We can build a temple in a place of rest, in a place of menucha, when we get along with each other. Just getting along, choosing the individual over the opinion, choosing the individual over the philosophy, getting beyond and above the differences. That's how we make a home for God in this world. And so my blessing for you today is I want you to think about it. This is a great time to reflect, a great time to think. Think about what's more important, your relationship or your fight or your opinion or your politics. What's more important? What's going to bring you peace? What's going to bring the world peace? And Hashem should bless you that through making the right choices, you should be able to see that we do come to a world, that your personal world should be a world of peace, and the global world should be a world of peace. Have a wonderful day.